Okay, we're getting toward Christmas, and that means the NFL season is definitely coming into full view in ways both good and bad. Some teams, their season has come together in the way that they wanted it to. Some teams are out of it, and one team I did not expect to be in that latter group as we talk on December 13th is the Los Angeles Chargers. But here we are. News comes out yesterday. Justin Herbert is now on IR, out for the season after having finger surgery. The Chargers season is over. I thought Daniel Popper, who covers the Chargers for us, did a really good job with his piece today, just talking about how the Chargers have found themselves in an unfamiliar place in the Brandon Staley era, and that's irrelevance. Even if there have been frustrating moments, even if they've fallen short of expectation at times, they've always been in the conversation. They were either playing for their playoff lives in Week 18 against the Raiders or playing in the playoffs last year, even if it ended horribly. And now we're not even midway through December, and their season is done. So in your mind, where does this Justin Herbert injury not only leave Justin Herbert, where does this leave the state of the Los Angeles Chargers right now?
Well, I mean, it's just they're going to have to start fresh, right? Like that's the number one thing to me. They're not relevant right now, and that's the biggest thing that I think. You go back and I'm like, man, that's right. That was 2 years ago that we were playing. We just needed to tie the Raiders in Las Vegas, and that was the craziest game. I think we completed like 8 fourth down, or we got 8 fourth down conversions in that game, some NFL record. And then last year, put it together toward the end of the year, win a lot straight, and then we go to Jacksonville, lose that crazy game. And it did feel a little bit different from an outsider's perspective, but yet an insider. So I was like towing the line on both, like, okay, how do I feel about the Chargers going into the season? Because I've been in there, I've seen it, and then try to step back, put the media cap on and understand, okay, well, and I was sort of mixed. I thought for sure with the hire of Kellen Moore that they were going to do better things, and that maybe finally in his third year at the helm, that Brandon Staley could fix that defense. And it just is not true at all. And it just hasn't happened. And that's probably the number one thing that Brandon Staley's going to regret, that a bunch of Chargers fans regret, is getting their hope up, right? Like time and time. This is different. It seems like it happens every single year. And look, with Justin, I think it's an interesting conversation, and one that with Justin, I just think that he needs a little bit of a reset. Like obviously, like when he broke his finger and he went in, like to the training room, like everyone knew that he was probably done for the season. Like when you have a finger injury, like first of all, he had one on his non-throwing hand, he played through, it just wasn't the same. And then he had this injury, and then he had a rib injury last year. It just seems like these little, I say little, they're really not little injuries, but these injuries that keep mounting up, like sort of take away from his greatness. And he hasn't really been himself since 2021. So that's 2 full years of going through, trying to fight through injuries, trying to make it right. And I think he played at times when he was healthy in this Kellen Moore style offense. Like I thought he played really well. And so that to me is the biggest thing, is just like take a step back. Like, look, I love Brandon Staley, but the chances of him being there next year are slim to none. And that's sort of the state, in my opinion, right now of Justin and the Chargers. And it's hard to watch because I know all those guys. Like, yeah. I sweated with those guys. We went to battle with those guys. We worked through a lot of stuff in that locker room, just like any other team would. And just like 2021, the way it ended, 2022, the way it ended with that playoff loss. And you're thinking, man, and Justin still doesn't have a playoff win. That's the biggest thing to me, that going into this probably new like head coaching search, that you're going to have someone that really gets the most out of Justin Herbert.
How would you categorize the first 4 years of Justin Herbert's career? Are you satisfied with them? Do you think they're disappointing from a team success perspective? All the guys that have gotten these top of the market quarterback deals over the last offseason or two, guys drafted in 2020, 2021. Think about those players. Joe Burrow has been to 2 AFC championship games and a Super Bowl. Jalen Hurts went to the Super Bowl last year. Lamar Jackson has an MVP award. Justin Herbert's individual accolades and team accolades have never risen to that level. I think he's a very good quarterback, but I'm curious, as somebody who has seen this up close and is looking at both him and the Chargers from a bubble outside of what I'll call like football hipster internet, which I think is sometimes too insular and we can't see beyond ourselves.
Yeah.
You may not be the right person to ask for perspective on this because you might be too close to it. But how would you characterize both who he is as a quarterback right now and how would you put into context what the first 4 years have looked like when you compare it to the other guys who we've no-brainer given those contracts to?
Yeah. I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a disappointment, right? Because it's not. He won Rookie of the Year 2021, had a heck of a year under first-year offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi. And then you look at the last 2 years. So half of his years in the NFL have been he's been hurt. Like he was a lot more injured and hurt than people like thought in 2022. That affected his play. Of course it did.
Is that its own problem though?
In what way?
If these guys are, if he's going to have lingering injuries that continue to affect him, is that its own issue?
Well, I would say that I don't necessarily know if they're lingering in terms of like, it's not like he's not because this dude works out like crazy. Like he's a workout
machine.
warrior.
He's absolutely shredded up. People do not appreciate that about him. Standing next to that guy, he's in insane shape.
He really is. So it's just a little bit, I call like like you have a guy that always gets injured. Like, okay, cool. This isn't Justin. He's just a little bit of bad luck, like a finger and then 2 fingers in the same year. And then just the way he landed in the KC game when he fractured his rib cartilage, like it didn't even look bad. Like it just looked like he landed and all of a sudden, and then that just turns into it. So I don't think that's a separate issue. But the biggest thing with Justin,
I tend to agree with you, by the way. I think this is just a stretch of bad luck, which we've seen for other guys in the past.
And the thing with Justin that I just go back to is that, the supporting cast around him on offense is really, really good. Now, are they going to be able to keep all those guys together? Is Quentin Johnson finally going to step up and be the guy they hope that they would? Are they going to be able to keep Austin Eckler? Are they going to be able to keep Mike Williams and Keenan Allen both? What are they going to do in the draft? I think they've solidified that offensive line for the most part. And it's really like, if you look at the games where Justin's played well, it's been those games that the run game is married with the pass game. He's under center, play action, deep shots down the field, taking those shots. And then look, the Lombardi offense, people want to give Lombardi a bad rap. It was just the way teams were playing us in 2022 when we just didn't throw the ball down the field. And I think Kellen Moore sort of unlocked that. So that's a whole nother issue. Like, first of all, does Kellen Moore, if Brandon Staley gets fired, does Kellen Moore get an interview there because of his success with Justin in that offense? And secondly, if not, if you bring in a new head coach, do you keep Kellen Moore? Because Kellen Moore he's going to get scooped up, probably going to get some head coaching interviews like he has the past couple of years. So it's an interesting situation over there in LA.
Let's talk about the personnel first. This is going to be a challenging offseason because of how many chips they pushed into the middle of the table for 2023. This team is currently $42 million over the 2024 salary cap. And that's with Justin Herbert carrying a $19 million cap hit next year. That's it. This huge contract, this huge extension, those big numbers aren't coming until a little bit further down the road. I want to read some cap figures to you. Khalil Mack, $38.5 million. Joey Bosa, $36.6 million. Mike Williams, $32.4 million. Keenan Allen, $34.7 million. And there are a bunch of other guys in the $15 to $20 million range. There are decisions that are going to have to be made, and I'm fascinated by what those decisions are ultimately going to look like. Do they trade one of these guys? Do they trade Joey Bosa? Yeah. Do they move on from Mike Williams where they can save $20 million against the cap? So I think that there are going to be some serious hits to some of that supporting cast next year, whether it's on offense or defense. And you talk about a reset. I'm wondering how hard of a reset this team actually hits, especially if we get a new front office along with a new coaching staff, which I think is a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, it is a possibility, and those are astronomical numbers. First of all, like it just seems to me that they've kicked the can down the road. Now, will they continue to kick the can down the road? I don't think they're going to keep every single one of those players, but Keenan, like I got to give Keenan some love. Like he just keeps doing it. Like he's an ageless wonder. It is insane. And I would say, like, if I had to choose, like you're going to keep Keenan over Mike, because Mike's sort of that injury, his knee, you don't know how it is. He's sort of injury prone, still a really good player, but I think Keenan does more for Justin in the pass game. Now, that's the thing about this is like you drafted Quentin Johnson to replace Mike Williams at some point. Is that point this year? I have no idea. Like that's just so many different layers. Like, is Tom Telesco still there? Are there other changes in the front office? Does this new head coach that they bring in, if they fire Staley, does he have say over the roster? Does he bring his own guy? So I don't know if you're going to do this like crazy hard reset, maybe like the Rams did after they won the Super Bowl, just because they couldn't afford everyone. But the D line is interesting. Like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa over 30. Like I think you keep one of those guys. But like, how do you get rid of Khalil Mack? Like the dude is
after
having
the season that he just had.
Like, yeah, you got. I feel like there's certain ways that really good GMs, really good front offices, they maneuver the cap, right? And do you want to just keep kicking some? Do you want to do a restructure where, hey, let's just run this back maybe one more year, figure out who we're going to keep, figure out a good nucleus? Because I felt like they, for the most part, they drafted pretty well the last couple times. So it's a fascinating, like it's probably one of the most fascinating things that I'm going to be watching this offseason is, one, if Staley gets fired, who gets the job? Two, does Telesco make it through? And three, what do they do to build around Justin?
If they move on from Khalil Mack, Mike Williams, and let's say Corey Linsley, whose health is a question moving forward, he's obviously missed most of this season with a heart issue, they're already under the cap with those three. So they can do it. They're just going to have to lose some of these big name pieces that we're talking about. And I think Mike Williams and even maybe Joey Bosa, I think about how injured they've been over the last couple of years. It might be time to move on from a couple of those guys and move in a new direction. And Corey specifically, when we talk about what this offense has been missing this season, I think his absence has been underrated. If you watch what they're doing, especially against pressure right now, they just aren't doing a great job with their pressure plan and how they're picking stuff up. And I think that they've missed him specifically in that area. But overall, the offensive line was supposed to be a marginal strength this year compared to previous seasons. With Slater coming back, Pipkins was supposed to be healthier on the right side after a lingering injury all of last year. They were dropping Jamari Sawyer in at right guard. Zion Johnson was moving back to his natural position at left guard. Supposed to be a strength of the roster rather than a drawback, which it had been in previous years. But if you look at some of the areas where this team was supposed to be better, everybody I talked to in training camp, everybody there, what needs to be better on offense? What needs to be better on offense? We need to be able to run the ball. We need to be able to run the ball consistently based on how teams are playing against us. That was hammered over and over and over again. Everybody in football media was obsessed with this pushing the ball down the field stuff, and that was going to be the difference. Everybody in that building was telling you how much better the run game was going to be because of Kellen Moore. Where do you think the Chargers rank in rushing success rate this season?
26th.
30th.
Oh, even worse.
The Bucs and the Jets are the only two teams worse than them. So I think right now, the plans they've tried to institute offensively over the last couple of years have not worked. And that's why, to me, you need a fairly hard reset for what that's going to look like, which brings me to the question I really wanted to ask you. Everything is on the table right now, essentially, because this could arguably be the most attractive head coaching job that comes open because of what everyone thinks about the quarterback, justifiably. Yeah. So if you were picking an offense to drop Justin Herbert into, and you can have anything in the NFL that you wanted, you could steal from any system, any coordinator, who would it be? How would you reset this thing?
Ben Johnson. That's an easy one to me. And I do agree that this will be the most attractive for a lot of reasons. The main thing being the quarterback. I think they have good pieces defensively, just not the right scheme. Okay. And so I think that you bring in, and we've talked about this before, and I think you bring in like an offensive, innovative coach, because you have to, after you give the contract to what Justin does, like Justin is your franchise, you have to make sure that he is happy, he is playing well in that system, and just the creativity, the use of motion, the use of different personnel groups, what he's able to do, what he's done with Jared Goff. Could you imagine, like I love Goff, and Goff's playing well, struggled as of late, but could you imagine what he'd do with Justin Herbert? Like in those weapons, like you would say, for the most part, other than the running backs, like in the offensive line for Detroit, the skilled players in LA are better than the skilled players that are in Detroit.
I'm pushing back on this. I
Okay.
don't think that
Even the receiver room, other than Amon.
I don't think the Chargers have this great collection of skill position talent without Mike Williams on the field. And we haven't been
Yeah.
able to count on him at all. We just
Yeah.
said he might not be on the roster next year. If you look at who he's throwing the ball to right now, we got Alex Erickson out there and Jalen Guyton and Gerald Everett and Stone Smart. I think that we have this idea of what the Chargers are when everyone is on the field and everything is clicking and running on all cylinders. And I just don't think that they've been that for a little while. So I don't think the Lions are great by any stretch, but I don't think the Chargers have this super team of offensive skill position talent the way we've thought about them in the past.
Yeah, that's fair. But I would say like I imagine with the quarterbacking and the skill group that they could put together on offense with Quentin Johnson, say Quentin Johnson and Keenan and Mike come back, and you get Eckler back. Like that's a good group. You got to get a tight end in there. But I would love to see like a Ben Johnson paired with like an old head defensive coordinator that like just is like matter of fact. We're doing a couple things on defense. We're not going to be this crazy blitzing defense. We're not going to just play cover 2 or cover 4. Like, here's what we're going to do. Like I know it'll never happen, but I just go back to Vic Fangio. Like I just have enjoyed my time so much with Vic and learned so much about Vic and just how steady he is as a coach and what he's been able to do. And they paid him handsomely to go down in Miami. And you can tell they're playing a lot better this year than they have in past years. But yeah, give me like a Ben Johnson mixed with an old head defensive coordinator that just like gets it. And I think that if you surround Justin with enough of the right pieces and you have an organizational reset, it really is like a fascinating, because they could go a lot of different ways. They could go just for a straight up like full on rebuild. Okay, everyone is fired and let's just start new. But I don't know. I mean, I just go back to I think Tom Telesco does a great job. And does he get another head coach hire? That's what it comes down to.
It'd be a lot of them, man. He's gotten more leeway and a lot more leash than a lot of general managers around the NFL have with some of the missteps.
Who would you like to see? That's another thing. Who would you like to see? You're probably more in the know on a GM. Like if Telesco were to go.
I'm not the right person to ask
who's
about
out
that.
There.
I have a much better sense of the coaches than I do about the general manager candidates.
Yeah.
I don't know who I would hire to run the thing. From the coaching side of it, I get Ben Johnson. Why don't you try this one on? What about Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen?
Yeah. I mean, what Dennis has done, but he's not getting fired after 1 year.
It's been 2 years. It's been 2 years. If they don't win the division this year, I would not be surprised.
They're going to win the division at 8-9. Watch it. They're going to get into the playoffs at 8-9.
That'd be the guy I would throw in there. Is the guy who's got a ton of experience. He's had a lot of success as a defensive coordinator. Here's what I will say offensive system wise. And I came to this yesterday when I was rewatching the Chargers Broncos game and just getting so frustrated watching them throw a quick game with this guy who has a bazooka attached to his right arm over and over and over again. I want to see him in the 2021 through 2023 Los Angeles Rams offense. I don't want to see another three-step drop for the next 20 years of Justin Herbert's career. I don't. I just don't care about it anymore. And if you look at the numbers, I was looking at Sports Info Solutions yesterday because I was like, am I crazy? Matthew Stafford has the lowest number of one or three-step dropbacks in the NFL among full-time starting quarterbacks this year. When you have a quarterback like that, I want him to either be pushing the ball down the field or something off of play action. Yeah. I don't need.
They're heavy play action, right? Yeah, like heavy.
I don't need it. Yeah. So that's what I want, and I think Ben Johnson is smart enough and malleable enough where he's going to incorporate a lot of it because he doesn't come from one schematic background, right?
It's pretty similar though. If you watch it, like 21 through 23, they're pretty similar in how they are always jet sweep motion. They're heavy. I bet if you, I don't know, we didn't probably come prepared for this, but I know for the fact that the Rams, since their bye, have been like the heaviest under center play action team in the NFL. Like I'd imagine that LA, I mean, Goff is under center a lot. Like I think that's what Justin is.
I think so too. I think, and if you're in the gun, can it be a more heavy 7-step drop back concepts from the gun sort of offense like we've seen from the Rams over the last couple of years? Because I'm sure that people who look at Justin Herbert and his record and only listen to all of us who keep saying, I promise you guys, he really is really good. I swear to God, he's a really good quarterback. It reminds me a little bit, and I think Matthew Stafford was more mired in the middle during his time in Detroit than people consider Justin Herbert, who a lot of people are putting as a top 5-6 quarterback.
Yeah.
But it's similar to me. It's like, how can this guy with all this talent be a part of these forgettable teams? Like, at a certain point, shouldn't his offenses be better than this if he's super talented? Even with talented quarterbacks, you look at how much circumstances matter and how much context matters. And if you put them in the right spot with a couple tweaks here and there, we can see different versions of them. And that's why I don't think we need wholesale changes to all of the offensive personnel or what Justin Herbert is, but just little tiny tweaks of the dial to make sure that we're getting everything we can out of him. And I think that sort of offense is the best route to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on. Like, a lot of times people that don't understand NFL offenses, they just think that, or teams, like, we just need to throw everything out the window. We need to start from scratch. No, you don't. You don't need to start from scratch. It's these little bitty details, even from like, hey, under center play action, like a little bit wider play action snap point than like inside zone, like just something that you can get feedback from Justin and say, I feel really comfortable doing this. Okay, well, this is, hey, if I'm under center, I don't want to naked to my left. I just want to naked to my right, and I want to set up. Or maybe I like going to my left because it switches up what defenses do. Just all the little bitty intricacies of the game. You switch a couple of those with a couple personnel changes, like you're going to get the most out of Herbert.
Ben Johnson, Dennis Allen, and I'm calling Mike Munchak and just being like, hey, you want like $3 million? I know you're semi-retired, but it's warm out here. It's nice out here.
Would be crazy.
Here's like $3 million. And I know the Chargers don't typically operate like that.
No.
But looking at how underwhelming the performance of this year's offensive line has been when you compare it to the hopes we had for this group coming in, that to me is also a very important hire for however they build this next staff.